The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Today's webinar, How to Build Financial Mobile Apps in Record Time. Thank you for joining us for this exciting discussion. Let me quickly review today's agenda. First, Larry Tabb, founder and CEO of Tabb Group, will present an overview of some recent research around the usage of mobile devices and apps. Following that, we will have a discussion around how to build financial mobile apps in record time. 5 themes that impact your mobile strategy. Our panelists today include Stéphane Dubois, CEO of Xignite, Jennifer Johnson, CEO of Visible Market, and Mazi Dar, CEO of Openfin. Following their discussion, we will have a Q&A session. Now for the Q&A, we welcome your questions, so please use the chat functionality to send your questions in throughout the webinar. Also, I wanted to note that the first 50 people who registered and are attending today's webinar will receive a free download of the StockTouch app. Those lucky 50 folks will be receiving an email from Xignite to let you know that you've won. Today's presentation will be recorded and then posted to the Tabb Forum website, www.tabbforum.com. So you receive a note when that's been uploaded, and you can go back and review some of the discussion and the slides that happened that we see today. So with that, let's begin. Our first presenter is Larry Tabb, founder and CEO of Tabb Group, as I mentioned. Tabb Group was founded in 2003. It's a financial markets research and strategic advisory firm focused exclusively on capital markets. Larry, take it away, please.
Thanks, Greg. You can advance the slides. That would be great. I'm Larry Tabb, founder and CEO of Tabb Group, and I'm going to talk about smartphones and mobile apps. So you can't. One of the most visible things in the world today really is mobility. You can't walk down the street without bumping into somebody who's looking at their smartphone. You can't escape. To a certain extent, you can't even escape work these days without smartphones. But that said, it's also one of the most exciting things that's happening in technology these days. And if you look at smartphones and their ownership, where now smartphones have a 46% market share, or basically 46% of the U.S. population actually has a smartphone, which is actually outpaced feature phones now. And if we look at the folks that really don't even have a cell phone, it's down from 17% to 12%. So smartphones tremendously well penetrated in the market these days. Next. So while we have a 46% utilization in the U.S., smartphones globally is still not nearly as fully penetrated as traditional feature phones or dumb phones are. There's still a long way to go. We're only at about 835 million units out in the market of about 5.6 billion units of traditional phones. So there's still a lot of growth in this market. Next slide. We went and recently talked with 25 different CIOs, CTOs of Wall Street firms, and really talk with them about what are their burning issues and what are their driving issues. We just recently wrote a paper, Reinventing Capital Markets Infrastructure, that this data came from. And while mobility isn't high on the intensity scale, as data management and cost issues are really keeping these guys awake at night, one of the most exciting things these guys are looking at is mobility, and how do I take advantage of this whole wide new infrastructure of devices and ways of being able to deploy information and technology out to the public. So it's very high on what these CTOs and CIOs are thinking about. Next slide. And if you look at the general population, we've seen the download of apps just skyrocket. Just from 2009, where there were 2 billion apps downloaded, we're now somewhere around, last year we were 30 billion apps being downloaded at a 300% growth rate per year. Just phenomenal. We don't see that changing, especially as the penetration of smart apps continues. So what are folks doing with these devices? Well, the first thing is market data. Those are pretty straightforward. In fact, the first market data mobile device I saw was probably, I want to say, 1997. It was a Palm Pilot with a basically taped together with a modem, focusing on market data. We've come a long way since then. We've also seen trading apps and basic OMSs being generated. In fact, one of the large brokers has recently enabled folks to craft their algos, via an iPad, a mobile device. Salesforce automation, getting iPads and iPhones and mobile devices out to Salesforce so they can talk with their high net worth clients and see statements and things like that. Research and investment ideas, getting research out to people so they can read it on planes or wherever they are. Management dashboards, so the whole issue about what's going on in my environment, am I red, green, yellow, where are we with different issues. Board packs, you can't have a board today, I think, it seems, without giving them an iPad with all the board information on it. And certainly technology support so that I don't have to, log on at, my computer at 2 in the morning when things blow up. So folks are really starting to look at mobility as a wide way of deploying a bunch of really interesting technologies. So one of the other interesting things we see in talking with the CIOs and CTOs about their infrastructure is that cost pressures or complexity issues are focusing a lot of these CTOs to look externally. So if you look at the chart on the left, 53% of folks are really shifting their technology spend towards external services from internal. So we're looking at hardware, software, hosting, consulting services away from internal employees. And that's also playing in on the right side. If we look at hosting, 35% of the CIOs, CTOs we talk to are really spending more on external hosting. Now, mobile isn't necessarily driving these numbers, but certainly mobile is playing into this because a lot of folks are looking to external service providers to help them with their mobile strategies. And a lot of folks are deploying a lot of these strategies outside their core data center. So while it isn't driving these, it's certainly playing into a lot of these issues. So next slide. So I have a mobile strategy, or I want to get a mobile strategy. I want to try to deploy content out to my folks and applications out to my folks and to my clients. What platform am I going to develop for? If you look at this slide, it's from Good and BGR. It looks at enterprise market share of mobile devices. So what are the folks using within large firms? And clearly, if you look at iOS, which is the iPhone, the iPad, 3G, and iPad 2s, and the whole Apple infrastructure. Certainly, we're looking at firms in the enterprise really gravitating to that deployment, that device, much more so than the Android devices. But if you look at the market overall, the next slide. If you look at the market overall, you're looking at on the upper left-hand side, that chart is really of handheld devices in terms of phone devices. We're at 47% Android versus 43% Apple, iOS. But if you're looking at overall penetration in terms of if you include tablets and iPads in that, it actually is much more focused, as we said, like on the enterprise side, you're much more focused on the Apple infrastructure, the iOS infrastructure. So with that, we're going to open it up to our discussion. How do we build financial apps in record time? And 5 themes you really need to think about in terms of mobile strategy. Again, we have Stéphane Dubois, the CEO of Xignite, Jennifer Johnson, the CEO of Visible Market, and Maisie Dar, the CEO of Openfin. And again, if you have questions, please type them into the chat section on your screen. So, and we'll open it up to Q&A in a little bit. So, to introduce these folks in a little bit more detail, we have Stéphane Dubois, the founder and CEO of Xignite. Xignite is a market data provider that just really leverages cloud infrastructure. And Stéphane first launched the first market data APIs in 2002, and Stefan was a former VP product management at Advent, one of our wonderful providers of infrastructure for the industry. Jennifer Johnson, she's the CEO of Visible Market, an internet entrepreneur. She spearheaded development of StockTouch app, the #1 financial app on the iTunes store. And if you haven't seen it, we'll show a little video of it. It's actually pretty cool. Jennifer was formerly held positions at UBS, at Merrill, and the Philadelphia Stock Exchange. And last but not least, we have Maisie Dar, the CEO of Openfin, a financial technology innovator. In fact, Openfin actually kind of developed our Tabb Group apps, and Openfin does a lot of their development in HTML5 toolkit. They help build, host, and deploy financial apps. And Maisie formerly held positions at ICE, the Intercontinental Exchange, Creditex, and UBS. And so, again, if you have any questions, please talk to or type it in the chat section of your screen. And so the 5 themes, again, to reiterate, that we think are going to impact your speed to market. First is the scope. Do we want to build feature-rich versus simple apps? What platform are we going to develop, native or cross-platform? Am I going to use internal or external resources? And how am I going to integrate proprietary data? And then how am I going to get external data? Am I going to get it from the cloud or some other data feed source? And with that, we'll really focus on the first question. Do we want to build feature-rich or simple apps? And I think when we look at kind of my time developing apps and developing applications in the industry, I started in the industry in 1980, and basically it was the mainframe, and there were these big monolithic applications that took months, actually probably more like quarters and years to actually develop. That, however, is absolutely changing. So Jennifer, let's start with, tell us a little bit about StockTouch, and then talk about your decision really whether to kind of build the Rolls Royce, or do we really want to build something smaller and just get it out to the market quicker, and that trade-off.
Okay, thanks, Larry. We launched StockTouch about 10 months ago. It's a dynamic tactile heat map of the stock market, and it shows 900 of the top U.S. and global equities for users on their iPads and iPhones, and it's built in native iOS. Over 30,000 people spend more than 700,000 minutes a month on StockTouch, and we have about 3,000 to 5,000 users a day, and our average use is about 3 minutes. The reason that we feel that we're seeing such active use of the app is that we started from scratch. We built StockTouch specifically for mobile touch. We thought a live data visualization would make an awesome front-end interface to start from. Starting with the visual enables the users to see the markets contextually as they unfold, and we break stocks into 9 sectors to make it simple. The platform is the first of its kind to apply a game engine to visualize statistical data. We parallel process all of our analytics on AWS EC2, and we combine that with live market data feeds. Then we use a proprietary compression technology that transmits the information at around 20 times the speed of comparable apps. Then we render all the contextual market data at once, and that provides a completely fluid user experience, which we feel makes the data much easier to understand. Users can dive in and out of the data seamlessly, understand absolutes as well as the contextuality, and we feel more easily grok trends and spot outliers. And our roadmap is evolving into on-the-go financial users and investors, and we're adding personalized data, social, and deeper analytics. Basically, what they're going to be needing for meetings, lunch, on the go.
Mm-hmm. Maisie, you work with a lot of firms developing apps. What are your thoughts about speed versus speed of deployment versus feature-rich? Are you looking at to try to build everything into these, or try to get smaller things out quicker?
Yeah, well, look, with apps, simple is almost always better. The great thing about building a simple app is that it gives users a better experience, and it turns out it's actually also faster to build a simple app. I'm personally a big believer in the approach of getting something in the hands of your users to start a first version of the app, and then getting feedback and iterating based on that feedback. That approach ensures that you're focusing on the things that matter to your users and not wasting a lot of time building functionality that ultimately won't be used. We're seeing a lot of the firms in the financial industry taking this approach. Firms are focusing on a subset of the functionality that they're providing. So if they're a trading platform, it may be real-time market data. If it's a research firm, it'll be specific research reports. And others are building companion apps to their platforms. So as Jennifer said, it's really a focus on things that people will be using on the go.
Stefan, a lot of times, in the industry, we get caught up in trying to build, put everything into a single container. What are some of the downsides that can happen when we try to do that?
Well, I think building an application quickly is important, but make it successful, quick and successful is even better. I think you must strive, and we've seen that with StockTouch, you must strive to have something unique, and unique means cool. And cool is typically going to be around the presentation, the interaction with the user. You need to have some gimmick, something very innovative there. It's going to be a lot less about the back-end work. Right? So what it means is you need to very early on allocate your time so that you spend it creating unique value on the front end and minimize the time you spend on the back end. We see a lot of firms making mistakes initially that end up costing them a lot of time, is they focus on the back end first, while they should be thinking about moving as much of that to the cloud. At the end of the day, any minute you spend on market data infrastructure, back-end infrastructure, that you could spend making your app more unique is going to be wasted. And at the end of the day, you'll have a successful app that you built quickly.
So really, focus the time on the user experience and worry a little less about the back end.
Or see how you can outsource it and make that simpler.
Mm-hmm. So I guess the next question, the next issue that we want to really talk about is native versus cross-platform. When you saw my presentation, iOS seems to be much more used than Android. But that said, there's some new technologies, certainly HTML5, that go cross-platform. So I guess that one of the things I guess when we look at this is when you start building natively, you get a little bit more feature functionality. You can build a little richer app, and we have StockTouch demo here that Jennifer, you want to explain this before we get going? And while we run the demo, we're not going to talk because I think the video or the audio gets a little messed up. Why don't you talk a little bit about StockTouch and what we're going to see?
Okay. StockTouch is built in native, and it's a heat map of the stock market. Its front end is a heat map that's divided into 9 sectors, and its back end is delivered from AWS so it's cloud-based in-memory database. And basically, StockTouch is really about the user experience. It looks like a picture, but it's really a game. It's really built on a game engine, and it's because the heat map is really tied to 60 frame per second animation with the vertical zooms and visual search.
So why don't we take a look at the video real quick? Real quick. There we go. So I guess it's kind of a little difficult to get this if you're trying to develop cross-platform, that kind of feature-rich function, graphical user interface.
Yeah, to get that user experience, we had to develop in native. It's more possible to migrate now, but when we began developing it, and it was not possible, and particularly not just the software itself, but also just the memory capabilities of the devices.
Interesting. So, Maisie, you kind of focused a little bit more on cross-platform, more on HTML5. So are you seeing folks kind of adopting more cross-platform architectures these days, or do you still see folks developing natively?
Yeah, last year, we were seeing a lot of firms choosing iOS and building native applications. Most of the major banks have native apps in the App Store. What we're finding now is that that most firms in the industry are migrating toward HTML5, and that's not it's a financial industry theme. It's also a broader enterprise theme. We see three key drivers of that. One is that, as Jennifer said, the technology has moved on, and you can actually get user experience with an HTML5 app that's equivalent to a native application. And a second issue is that the HTML5 gets your app outside the Apple App Store. So what that means is that you're not subject to a revenue share, you're not subject to Apple's review policies, and you can get your app out quicker. The other problem with the App Store is that Apple doesn't give great support to the enterprise for apps. The third key driver is that it does help you get your app cross-platform. The reality is that the size of the devices need to be taken into account, and you can't just expect to build one app for, let's say, a tablet and have it work seamlessly on a smartphone. There's work to do there, but roughly 80% of the work that you do can be leveraged cross-platforms, and with some tweaking, it's a very efficient solution.
So it's not really build it once and deploy it everywhere. It's build it once and then tinker with it for each platform.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So let's go to the next. Question or theme, and really talk about internal versus external. One of the big issues I think in developing apps is do you want your team to do it, or do you want to outsource it? Jennifer, your team built StockTouch in house. Did you think of outsourcing this, or
We did think of outsourcing when it was on the drawing board, but basically we decided to focus with a really small team, 4 people, and we focused on innovation. So 4 people built our app in 4 months. Our goal was really to have a new paradigm for looking at market data and statistics. So we wanted to be a leader in the industry, so it would have been hard to outsource that kind of innovation. So we did it with a small team.
Mm-hmm. Maisie, when you talk with folks, and certainly you're an external development person, but some of the folks that you work with actually do a lot of this stuff in-house. How do folks think about that decision, whether to do it internally or externally? How does that kind of factor in, and what are some of the things that these guys are thinking about, whether they decide to do it themselves or give it out?
Sure. Well, Openfin provides an HTML5 toolkit that makes it easy to build apps. That toolkit can actually be used by in-house teams or third-party firms. What we're seeing from firms when they're thinking about whether to build in-house or outsource is really thinking about a few different factors. One, as Jennifer was saying, is it your core technology? Because if it is, then that might point to building in-house. If you don't have the in-house expertise, obviously, that you'll need to outsource. It's also a question of priority. A lot of firms have other projects that are related to financial regulation and reworking market infrastructure, and so what they're doing is outsourcing the mobile and having their internal resources focused on job one. And a final factor is cost. Sometimes it can be more cost effective to do things in-house, and often the outsourcing firms will charge premium to do the development. One last point I'll throw in there is that the really cool projects out there right now are the mobile projects, and sometimes firms don't want to take that away from their internal development teams, and that becomes a factor in their decision making as well.
Stefan, we were talking earlier, about internal and external development, and you had a number of interesting things I really hadn't thought about in terms of whether you use internal or external resources. Why don't you talk about
Sure. One thing to think about is developing externally provides a way to short-circuit a lot of the internal decisions around technology, which are decisions that can take a lot of time inside a large financial institution. So if you go external, essentially you can defer a lot of the technology choices and go to market a lot more quickly. On the downside, your ability to use a third-party developer will be bound by your ability to give them access to the information they need to build the apps. So for example, if all the market data you need to consume requires a lot of internal expertise, about a very complex internal system, your ability to outsource that and to go to market quickly will be low. But if you can provide easy access to the data, maybe through the cloud, then you'll spend less time and you can go to market quickly. Also, at the end of the day, outsourcing is not a guarantee for speed. You have a lot of other factors, like one of the firms we deal with saw the app development delayed over and over because of complex negotiation with their vendor regarding the ability to use legacy data in an iPad app. So the money they were trying to save on the market data side and the outsourcing side eventually was offset by the additional months of development it took to build that app. So you have to look at all 5 factors.
It's not as straightforward as just as it may seem.
Yes.
Again, well, let's move to our fourth issue, really talking about proprietary data integration. But before we get into this topic, I just want to remind folks that if they have any questions, please type it into the chat section, and then we'll pick it up in a couple of minutes once we're done our 5 themes. Getting back to theme 4, proprietary data integration, do we want to try to create and include proprietary information in apps, or do we want to try to stay a little bit more generic? I'll start off, Maisie, with you. Folks kind of want to try to create kind of a tailored and rich environment and put their own unique content under there, but what are some of the issues that you see with trying to include proprietary data in mobile apps?
Yeah, well, if once you make the decision to include customer-sensitive information or trading information, it hugely increases the amount of work that you need to do around those kinds of security issues and potentially around compliance. We've seen a number of hedge funds who were thinking about delivering apps to their employees spend a lot of time on this topic, and the tolerance for potential mistakes and data theft is near zero at some firms. So if that's needed in your application, then expect to spend more time on that, and if it's not needed, then it's probably best to avoid.
Stefan, what are your thoughts about protecting this data? Now all of a sudden, we've seen folks like what was it, TGX that lost millions of customer records and things like that. How do we wind up protecting ourselves with all these devices with proprietary data wandering all over?
So there are 2 main issues, as we've seen with many clients. First one is, how do I get to the legacy data? And the second thing is, how do I make that secure? And those issues are often mixed, and none of those really make development easy. The idea of providing a direct way for an untrusted device, because a lot of it is bring your own device, to access sensitive information over an untrusted public mobile network, that can be a huge issue for many firms. So firms have several options to speed things up at that stage, to relatively speed things up. One is to use some third-party technologies like Cicero for legacy data integration, or FrameHawk for mobile app security. So these will provide ways to easily bring some legacy data forward into the app. or instead of bringing data to the app, just bring images of the data, for example. So the data is never stored locally. The challenge is how do you make, how do you use this technology and still make the app, innovative and useful and whatnot. We know back in the days of the web, you couldn't take a green screen and bring it to the web and make that successful. Same thing today. You have to have the innovation. So at the end of the day, none of those things make the application development that quick if you have to deal with really tough security issues.
One of the things we talked about, beforehand, real quick, was something about being able to lock data, depending upon where it is, in terms of geo-locking or something like that. How does that work? And is that a way of doing it?
Sure. Yeah. It's called a geofence, and the idea basically is that you can figure out if a user, for example, is at or near work, and make certain data available to them, and if they're not, then that data wouldn't be delivered to the device. There are a lot of really great technologies out there now that actually can enhance security. We think beyond the existing or prevailing financial industry security standards. The challenge is that these are new technologies. People are still getting accustomed to them and getting comfortable with them, and people are generally risk averse and don't necessarily want to be the first to make a mistake with new technology.
Interesting. The whole geo thing is actually pretty cool. So it'd be interesting to see how that develops. And our last theme is market data integration, and then we'll absolutely get to a lot of the questions that have been submitted. There are a bunch of them here, so we might wind up going a little bit long, but we'll talk about market data integration in cloud and data feeds now. So one of the key aspects certainly of developing apps, is data. You don't want to create apps that don't really have anything on them. Firms have a number of options about data integration. They can get it directly from an exchange. They can get data from a large integrator or an aggregator, or a specialty vendor. Jennifer, your whole app is really about market data. How did you get your data, and what were some of the issues and challenges you had in terms of grabbing this information?
Well, it's interesting because you could say our whole app is about market data, but it isn't. Our whole app is about presentation of market data. So we didn't want to worry about market data, and we use the Xignite APIs for all of our data. And basically that's really what enabled us, having the data essentially outsourced to them. That's how we built our app in 4 months with just a couple of people. We had one front end and one server developer, a designer, and a business person. So we just never worried about data. We just focused on our core competency, the front end and the data transmission.
Maisie, when you work with clients, how are you seeing folks, get their data?
It's a big problem. The amount of work involved in exposing your data to your app can be at least half, if not more than half, of the work to deliver an app. There are a lot of legacy systems in the financial industry where the data isn't exposed through a nice, clean API. The huge advantage of web services like those that Xignite offers is that you're getting a very well documented API that exposes lots of different data sets, some of which may be not core to what you need to do as an application provider, and so it's great to be able to find that data set and incorporate it easily. The other is that specifically around HTML5, you can think of web services as the data analog to HTML5 on the presentation side, and the two are very, very complementary. So we found it, we've integrated Xignite's web services, and we found it very easy to hook in and to do the data translation, and it hugely reduced the time to build applications.
Well, Stefan, it looks like you've got a few votes of support here from the other panelists. What makes Xignite kind of easy, and what are some of the issues that folks need to think about when they're integrating data?
Sure. I mean, I think what makes what works with our platform is just it's all about speed, right? So, and this is the topic we talked about. I think Jennifer made a strong case there. I think many of our clients end up making a selection between three possible approaches when it comes to market data. They can use legacy feeds and files, they can use legacy APIs, or they can use cloud APIs like ours if you want. And then there's two main architectural decisions they can make. Should they build a back-end market data infrastructure, or should they deliver the data straight to the device? And I don't think a lot of firms understand the implication those decisions will have on the speed of development, on the usability of the app, and whatnot. We had a client who had almost spent a year building a large market data infrastructure for one of their very popular apps. Quickly, this became a very unwieldy effort because they were dealing with data feeds that require a lot of expensive and complex infrastructure. And all of that just distracted them away from really making their app more competitive and compelling. And the cost just kept adding on. So eventually they decided to move completely to the cloud to experience what Jennifer was talking about. So some people also choose to go with legacy APIs. And legacy APIs also have some problems. They may use some old XML standards. They don't support JSON, which is going to be the most popular way to consume market data on the device. They can be slow and heavy and complex, which means that your device might not perform as well, so you will be forced to build some infrastructure. They may not be available or consistent across the universe of asset classes that you may need to support. So what's different with cloud platforms is the ease of use first. We try to make APIs that are very app-centric instead of being data-centric, so that you want to build something, you want to bring data to your app, you're going to be able to do that with as few lines of code as possible. We also provide them over a very broad array of data and in a very consistent way. We support a lot of standards like JSON. We make sure they're very elastic so that if your app, you end up selling tens of thousands of copies like Jennifer, that it's going to scale, right? And it's customizable, and there's a pay-as-you-go model that goes with it. So really, the cloud platform were designed and meant to support the requirement of mobile apps with a business model that backs it up as well. And that's why I think it's been successful so far.
Interesting. And with that, I think what we'll do is we'll open it up to Q&A questions. Again, you can type your questions in the chat section. There are a lot of questions here. We'll try to get to them, and the ones we don't get to, we'll email back. The first ones, which actually will be pretty simple, were questions to Jennifer, really asking which game engine was StockTouch built on, and what back-end framework does StockTouch use?
The game engine is built on our proprietary platform that was developed by our developer. So we don't use a commercial, we don't use a commercially available game engine. And our backend is, well, it's obviously Xignite's data feeds, but that the backend runs on the analytics version runs on EC2, and that spits out our files, our data files, or executables to S3, and the mobile app calls the files on S3.
And since our data is on EC2 and S3 as well, it speeds things up, right? So.
Okay. Next questions. HTML5 security issues. Are there issues with security with HTML5? And I guess that goes hand in hand with what approaches are vendors taking for securing the content within the app customer data, and how is it being accessed to conform to regulatory requirements and corporate security policies? So I guess those two questions kind of fit together. Maisie, you want to take that, since you're kind of developing apps that kind of fit in this realm?
Yeah, absolutely. There are a couple different aspects to the security. One is in just the use of JavaScript, which is a key component of an HTML5 application. The use of JavaScript introduces a number of potential security threats, cross-site scripting and the like, and so you need to be very careful to manage that and filter for it. And there are a number of techniques to do that. One of the things we provide in our toolkit is the ability for that to happen automatically, so the developers don't need to go out and figure all of that stuff out on their own. We use a lot of open source, so a lot of Google's Stack and other open source that's really become industry standard. The second key aspect of the security is how do you lock down the data and protect it on the local device. Now, one way to do that is to never store data on the local device, and you don't have to, as long as you have an internet connection. Where things become tricky is if you're trying to run an app offline, and there you can encrypt the data on the local device. And again, there's open source software that we leverage within our toolkit to make that easy for users to do. So there are great techniques to secure the data, and I would say in most cases, if you follow that, your data will be safer than it currently is on your website or through your existing platform.
Now, one of the things that was also brought up in that question was compliance. Are you seeing compliance get their hands around, regulatory compliance get their hands around a whole new wave of mobile devices?
Well, it's definitely top of mind, and people are still figuring out what the right best practices are. We've had, a hedge fund administrator I spoke with said, no way will we ever put customer data onto a mobile device, and again, zero risk tolerance around that. Clearly, many people are doing that, and there are existing standards for delivering data on the web and on laptops, and so a lot of these same issues have already been dealt with. I think because mobile is the new thing, it's getting some additional scrutiny, but the technology is certainly there to make sure that that apps are compliant and meeting industry standards.
The next question is, is the App Store a review approval process as tedious as everyone says it is? How long does it typically take to get a new app approved, and how long to get an update approved? Jennifer, you want to take that?
Not that long. I mean, we see something if you're distributing through the App Store to consumers. So that's what I can talk about. Enterprise apps, Apple-based distribution, and B2B distribution is a little bit different. But our client-facing app, we see a week, and a week for approval and sub-week for updates. So it's
not that big of a pain in the butt?
It's not that big of a pain in the butt.
Oh, okay. Amazing.
Sure. I think the problem gets introduced if you're walking a line with respect to Apple's App Store policies. So if you're doing things that may be outside their policies, it may take quite a bit longer. We heard one very large market data provider in the financial industry took 7 months to get their app approved and out to their users. I think if you do the right things, then it can be a very quick process. If you're doing something, let's say, let's say trying to be an app store within Apple's App Store, which is definitely not allowed, or other things that may violate their policies, it could take a lot longer. The other problem is there's a lot of uncertainty around it. Like there's no SLA for how long it's going to take them to approve your app, and that's definitely something to factor in when you're thinking about being in the App Store.
Another question. Can you explore the issue of supporting ever-changing hardware and firmware versioning? I guess with the proliferation of devices and Apple coming out with new devices all the time, and Android, supporting or being implemented in 4 or 5 or maybe even 6 different hardware providers, infrastructures. Are there issues here in terms of how you support each of these devices, and are you constantly kind of tweaking things up? New product came out, I got to go futz with this. I don't know.
Well, we support based on demand, and we support sort of because we're iOS only, we support sort of one iteration at a time. So recently when the iPad 3 had Retina display, we added Retina display to our capabilities. So it's really demand-based. It's where the active use is and where the feature is, and you roll it out with the capabilities of the device.
You seeing the same thing, Nathan?
Absolutely. I have yet to meet somebody with an Android tablet. I saw somebody with a BlackBerry tablet that was given to them. But basically, if you've got a tablet, it's an iPad. It's different on the smartphones. There's more even distribution there. But as Jennifer said, our approach is focus on where the users are. we added Retina display as well for iPad 3. Our approach is to really look at the percent of users that are still on the old operating systems for iPad and support the last few, so that that 90+% of users have migrated to. And there's some pretty good data out there on that. So that's the approach that we're taking.
A question here on market data. I think it's both to Stefan and to Jennifer, even though it's addressed really to Jennifer. How do you manage market open load? So I assume that means all the traffic that happens when the market gets going in busy time. And I guess Stefan may be actually the best person to, considering Jennifer outsources her market data to Stefan.
Well, in the case of market opens, actually Jennifer doesn't have to handle that load because she's pulling the data on demand.
So it's not a push.
She's
It's
not
not a
taking
push
the whole feed
infrastructure.
and not having to have big fat pipes with all the infrastructure and keep up with the server processing power to process this data. We do that for her, and she just pulls the data that she needs when she needs it. So that's not an issue for our apps developers.
There's a quick question about multilingual issues, especially Asian languages. Which any of you guys happen to know support for Asia? I think we struck out there. Let's see. Big data is a very big trend recently. Are there success for mobile apps which go against big data and display them in a visually consistent manner? Or are you familiar with Stefan?
Well, I don't know of any clients that have yet built apps on top of some of our big data solutions. We've partnered with NASDAQ, for example. They use our technology to provide easy access to years of historical tick and trade data for all U.S. markets. So it's essentially every trade, every quote that occurred in the U.S. market for many years. So it is a large amount of data, and it's available through simple APIs so that you could create some very visually appealing applications on top of that. It's been introduced fairly recently. I don't know if anybody has actually picked this up and started creating interesting visuals around that. But it's certainly possible to do today without having to maintain a lot of big data infrastructure since the data is available on demand.
Yeah, another interesting question, with the consumerization of IT, should mobile apps be designed with retail consumers in mind, or do enterprise users have different demands when it comes to mobile apps? I don't know, Isaac?
Sure, I can take that one. I think the definition of the consumerization of IT is that you've got users who are consuming retail apps coming into the workplace and expecting that same user experience and the same app experience and from their work apps, which tend to not be as good. So that's definitely impacting how people judge applications. It used to be that it was okay for your app to not look great and not be easy to use, and now the level of the expectations has hugely increased. We're seeing a lot of firms thinking about replacing trading front ends because they don't look good enough. Really taking a hard look at some of the gray screens, buttons everywhere, and thinking about elegance and simplicity and beauty as a key part of how they engage with their customers and how they build products. And that's been a big change from even where we were 2-3 years ago.
Interesting. I got one or two more questions because I think we're running out of time. We're not running out of questions, fortunately. But so are financial apps on an early stage compared with games, for example, or what can we expect for the future? So, Jennifer, I think that's to you. Since StockTouch really is one of the first real game engine financial apps, do we expect to see more of this?
Absolutely. I think that games push the envelope as they do because games and entertainment are what sort of grew the market to what it is. But now the iPads got deployed and they went from the home to the workplace, and frankly, they probably will see a lot more use in the workplace than really game use. So just like any adoption curve, the work use is more compelling and will be more often per day than games, and this is only the beginning.
Another question to you. How do you protect your ideas from being ripped off?
Well, we just try to build a better product, that's all.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we do IP. We have patents that are filed, but basically there's only so much we can do with that system. So we try to do it in two ways, and an active customer base.
And I think this will be the last question. I think we're running out of time, and want to make sure that everybody is okay with that. And I guess this is the last question. So what are the key steps you'd advise us to take to bring an app to market? What are the typical revenue sharing models for Apple versus Android and other, and what do you recommend? So I guess let's make this a little bit more generic question of, what do you think the key takeaways are to bringing apps to market? I guess both on the enterprise side and the retail side could be issues around revenue sharing models, but I don't know. Let's start with Stefan, and then we'll call this webinar then closed.
I mean, I think what we heard was keep it simple, keep it innovative. Don't build stuff that you don't have to build, so you can really focus on what's going to be meaning for your app. Try to pick up anything from the consumer that's applicable and valuable to the enterprise space, and think for the long term. That is, those apps that you're building today essentially might be the first of many other apps like it, and that will define how the enterprise is going to work 5 years from now.
Amazing.
Yeah, so there's a big difference between delivering an app, bringing an app to market for consumers and for enterprise. So with enterprise, you know who your customers are, and really the focus is not to try to monetize an app, but to get existing content or services that you're providing in the hands of your existing users. Now, on the consumer side of things, the app stores help you with discovery, and that's really a big value. And so if you can be in the top 10 of an Apple App Store category, you're going to get a huge audience that you wouldn't have otherwise gotten with another marketing technique. What some firms do is they will actually test their apps and initially launch them in, let's say, the Android marketplace or other app stores just to see the receptivity, because getting your app in the Apple App Store is sometimes a one-shot deal. There's some tricks that people have employed to get a second bite at it, but you really want to make a hit with the first one that you go out with, as Jennifer did, and that's a way to get lots and lots of customers.
So training wheels before you go into the real, to the big market. Huh?
That's right.
Jennifer, I think we'll leave the last comment to you. What are the key things you think to tell these guys to think about when bringing something to market, an app to market?
I would basically think closely about your users and think about delighting them with a user experience, because even if it's one feature or two features or some piece of information that they're surprised to get, or they get much easier than they would have gotten before, they will use your product, and that will fuel your feature development and your growth on the mobile platform.
I think that's a great place to leave it. So I think as technologists, you can never go wrong with delighting your users. I've seen many applications that leave us far from that. So, and with that, I want to thank everybody for joining us. I want to thank Stefan Dubois, the founder and CEO of Xignite, Jennifer Johnson, the CEO of Visible Market, and Maisie Dar, the CEO of Openfin. And I want to thank everybody for joining us. Now, this webinar will be presented on Tabb form. You'll be able to download it in entirety and in pieces. And any questions that we didn't get to responding to from the folks that very nicely sent them to us, we'll answer via email. And I want to thank everybody again for joining us. And this is Larry Tabb, founder and CEO of Tabb Group, saying we'll see you the next time. We're done?
Nice. Yes, I did.
Good. I